The fourth book of the Torah in Hebrew is called Bamidbar, meaning in the desert. In English, however, it's called Numbers, which, as we will see, is a serious misnomer. In Israel, on Memorial Days, whether for victims of the Holocaust or for soldiers that have fallen in Israel's wars, often one will hear the poem by Israel's great poet Zelda, which begins in Hebrew with the phrase L'chol ish yeshem. All people have a name. And this song comes to counter the dulling effect that statistics have on each of these days. It's so hard to connect to a raw number, whether it's 6 million victims of the Holocaust or the tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians who have fallen in Israel's wars. And Zelda comes to remind us that beyond those numbers, there are people, each a unique individual, each person with their own name. I remember once eating Salashuddis with Rav Shlomo Kalbach in a shul on the west side of Manhattan, and him telling us that the way to remember the Holocaust is to find one person and learn about him and identify with him, and through that person be a linkage to begin to experience the loss and horrors of the Holocaust. So in this context, we can understand why, according to Torah, it's forbidden to take a census. We know that in the book of Shmuel, David HaMelech wants to count the people in Israel, and Yoav, the commander-in-chief of the army, tries to dissuade him unsuccessfully. David makes the census, ultimately regrets it, and the Torah refers to a census as an abomination. And because in a census, certainly when a king wants to see how powerful I am, the people become a means to an end, a means to get a higher statistical number. And in fact, many of the evils of the 20th century were done because of this principle of thinking about people in terms of numbers. In Arthur Koestler's novel, Darkness at Noon, he tries to explain how even people who look themselves as having moral inclinations participated, or at least condone, Stalin's atrocities. And part of what it was all about was thinking of people as numbers, and some sort of mathematical equation that it's better for millions to die now so that billions will have a better life in the next generation. On a lighter note, there's a movie, Patch Adams, where a doctor revolutionizes the ward when he comes in and demands that the staff relate to the patients as people and not just numbers. For example, instead of saying that bed number 7 needs an IV, say Mrs. Schwartz needs an IV. Maybe it's less efficient, but not everything in life is about efficiency. Now, after all this, it's surprising why does our Parsha Bamidbar, begin with God telling Moshe to conduct a census of the Jewish people? Which, what's the difference between David doing a census, which is considered to be a sin, and God having a census done, which is a commandment to Moshe? Rashi sees the distinction, or based on Rashi we could see as distinction, based on the motivation. Relating to David presumably wanted to see his power as a king. How many people am I a king of? Whereas Rashi writes that God counted the Jewish people again and again because of his great love of the Jewish people. But I think we have to add an extra element to understand the difference and to understand Rashi himself. Ultimately, it was a different type of census that Moshe did than what David did. David ultimately achieved a bottom line number. But our week's Parsha is quite explicit that part of the census was according to their names and according to their families. Meaning, the names and the family, your family connection was part of that census. Here, the census does not erase the individual, but rather tries to have everyone and everyone's individuality as part of some great whole. There's the word Yisrael in Hebrew spells out the first letters of the phrase Yesh Shishim Ribo Otiot LeTorah. There are 600,000 letters to the Torah. And this expresses a belief that every Jew has a special connection, a unique connection to one of the letters of the Torah, which makes everyone essential, and only all of us together can create a tapestry of the Torah in its entirety. So there are two types of censuses: a census that erases the individuality, and a census which tries to be all-inclusive for everybody, and everybody based on who they are. Now, humanly, we aren't capable to relate to a census that has personal information about each individual. And that's why there's a difference between a human census and a divine census. We know that the Jewish people have been compared to the stars in the sky, and there's a verse said every day during prayers from the book of Tehillim that says, Moneh mispar lekochavim. God counts the numbers of the stars. Lekulam shemot yikra. To each star he gives a name. God, the creator of all, can comprehend all in its entirety, even with the uniqueness of every star, of every person. And these ideas can help us solve a mystery relating to the chronology of Sefer Bamidbar. Bamidbar creates a sharp break in the chronology of the story of the Torah. The book of Vayikra, the last stories, brought us to the first day of the month of Nisan, in which the Mishkan was dedicated. Our Parsha, the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar, begins with the census taking place during the month of Iyar, a month after the dedication of the Mishkan. However, in Parshat Naso, the second Parsha of the book of Bamidbar, we go back to that previous month and we tell about the 12 days after the dedication of the Mishkan, in which each day a different leader of a different tribe would bring a special korban. And I think the reason why the chronology has been changed is this new book of Sefer Bamidbar has a topic. And the topic is Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, for better and sometimes for worse, as some of the very negative stories will show us. However, the topic is Am Yisrael. And as a result, we want to start the book with the census of Am Yisrael, based on their names, based on their families, and only afterwards talk about the offerings of their leaders, to show that the power of the leaders and the significance of the Mishkan stems from Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, and not the reverse. One other riddle that these ideas could solve relates to next week's Parsha. The longest Parsha in the Torah is Parshat Naso, 176 psukim. And the reason why it's so long is because next week's Parsha details each one of the 12 offerings brought by the respective leaders of the different tribes. Now, if you look at the offerings, you will see that each of the 12 leaders brought exactly the same offering. So it seems totally unnecessary for the Torah to elaborately detail 12 times in a row what is exactly the same offering. But I think the answer is that even if it looks the same, it's different. The point is that on the outside, it's the same, but on the inside. A unique person brought each one of these offerings, and that's what makes each offering unique, each offering worthy to be mentioned. And this idea, I think, is the major idea that appears in the famous book, The Little Prince, in which the little prince lives on a star inhabited by himself and a beautiful flower. And he feels that his flower is unique. There's no flower in the universe like his flower. But when he makes it to planet Earth, he discovers a garden that has millions of flowers that look exactly like his flower. He's totally broken. He feels that all along he's been wrong and there's nothing special about his flower. But ultimately, the fox teaches him the secret of life, that which is essential is hidden from the eye. His flower is special not because of its external appearances, but the unique relationship between them. And going back to the message of the 12 leaders, they each bring the same korban, but each is different based on who has brought it. It's as if you got two presents for your birthday, but different people gave you this. Maybe it's the same, two people give you the same present, but it means something different based on who gave it to you. So, as the famous slogan says, same, but different. Shabbat Shalom.